So I have this client who has staph infection. As a matter of fact, she's not the only one. Okay, I'm just talking about her case because hers is happened recently within the last few days. There are others with similar cases. So I had this client who has a staph infection, and the infection is almost completely drug resistant to all the existing antibiotics currently in existence. And what she used to do is, over the last 2 years, she's been using our staph treatment. So she will come, use it this year, go away, come back the next year, buy it again, use. So it happened for 2 years. So she came a third time. And now my manager now told me, see, this is the situation. This lady has been told right from the beginning that when there is an infection, because obviously if she's infected and she's having sexual intercourse with her husband, he's also going to be infected. So both of them are infected. When you see a married couple, one person has an infection, the other one automatically has it. So she had been told right from the beginning that she and her husband have to use the treatment together, that she can't be the only person using it. But she said her husband refused, said he wouldn't do herbal treatment. So she just wants to treat herself. So her husband will go and then use antibiotics. The results, of course, is very predictable. This is a drug-resistant infection, already drug-resistant, that they've been using antibiotics for years, and the antibiotics has never worked. Why? Because that infection is becoming resistant to all those antibiotics from misuse and overuse. It's not even overuse, it's misuse. You see, because an infection becomes resistant to an antibiotic when you expose that infection to the antibiotic, and some of the bacteria recover, don't get killed. So this happens a lot when a person has an infection and they take antibiotics and they start feeling better, and then they stop instead of completing their dose. So what happens is that some of the bacteria don't get killed, they survive, and when they recover, they acquire genes for drug resistance. So they become drug resistant to that antibiotic. So over the years, they use antibiotics the same way, and before you know it, they create something that is called a superbug. A superbug is an infection that is resistant to all the antibiotics. That means there is nothing that can treat it. And this particular lady's infection and her husband's is almost a superbug, because when I look at its susceptibility profile against antibiotics, almost all the antibiotics is resistant. The ones that it is even susceptible to is just mildly susceptible. So that's a superbug. Yet this is something that she had carried for 2 years, despite the advice. Now, of course, you can't force anybody to use herbal medicine if the person doesn't want to. But the truth is, sometimes people need to be convinced. Anyway, so that's the situation. Now, what I need to tell people, or what people need to understand, is that this staph infection, every month I get about 2 or 3 cases of staph infections that are either superbugs or are almost superbugs. Let me just talk about Lagos. In Lagos. So that means this thing is going around. Okay. So it's becoming a problem for me in my practice, not because I am seeing cases, but because I'm now having people who, of course, their infections are almost superbugs or superbugs, whose infection cannot be treated with antibiotics, and they are coming to me, and they are coming with the same attitude that they use with the antibiotics, and it's going to create a problem for me in future. Because what happens, initially they used antibiotics, did not use it properly. When they get these herbs and they do not use the herbs properly, what happens? They will now create infections that are resistant to my herbs. So the same drug resistance that has happened with the antibiotic will gradually happen with mine. And in a few years' time, it may get to the point where our herbal formulation for staph is no longer effective. So I'm dealing with this. I'm trying to figure out how to do it, because one of the clients who has a similar case, we recommended a triple dose. So what I've mandated is anybody that has a serious staph infection, and I recommend more than a single dose, the person has to use everything. Not just that, their partner has to use it. And when they both finish their treatment, they need to sit down between the two of themselves and make a pact that there cannot be a third person in that relationship, except the person is going to use protection. I don't even want to delve into that because it's not my business. But that's the reality of what's going on, because I don't want a situation where people misuse the herbal product, which is now the only hope they have, because they've misused antibiotics, and then the herbal product is no longer effective. And then I have to start developing new antibacterial formulations every year or every two years. It's going to be too much for me to handle. So we are now going to be strict. If you have a partner and your partner refuses, we cannot sell the product to you, because we don't want a situation where we now create strains of infection that are now resistant to our product. It's going to be a public health nightmare. Yeah. So that's the thing. We people need to understand these things. You see, once it's an infection and you want to treat it properly. If you're not going to treat it properly, don't use that treatment at all, because a day may come when that might be the only hope you have left. If you've misused it in the past, what will now happen? So it's a dicey situation, honestly. It's something that we're currently dealing with in our practice. And it's not funny at all.